Okay, mute yourself.
Okay.
You see, in our discussion of deconstruction, we yesterday or day before yesterday talked about one very important concept in deconstructive theory, and that is the concept of trace. That means trace is not simply a simple word in deconstructive theory, it is a concept. And it is a concept which tries to find faults with structuralist theory, where structuralist theory presented language as a kind of closed and stable system. And so there we saw that if a particular word has a certain identity, then its identity is derived from the fact that it is not all those other words. In other words, we mention the differential nature of language, differential nature of language. That means a word gets its identity because of its difference from other words. A word gets its identity because of its difference from other words. And so a simple word like cat, if we change the phoneme at the beginning and phoneme at the end, and you will have number of different words. Okay. Similarly, we can also say that one particular word, say a word like red, say a word like green, it gets its meaning because it is contrasted with all those other words which it is not. So the word green also gives the word red its identity. The word black also gives the word white its identity. So that means at the conceptual level and at the phonemic level, you can see this kind of difference. Furthermore, we see that in structuralist theory, there was a concept of sign, and sign consisted of a signifier and a signified. That means structuralist theory talked about sign, which is equal to signifier and its signified. That means signifier is that sound image and signified is that concept. So the word rose is a signifier. And what is there in your mind when you think about the word rose? That is signified. So that was the view in structuralist theory. But in deconstruction, we see that they take this concept and they carry it further. So when structuralism talks about a kind of need system that language appears to be, deconstruction asks this question: where can we draw the line? Where can there be that kind of neatness if a word derives its identity from all those other words which it is not? Then where do we draw the line? How do we view language as a kind of stable system? What happens is that it is not the concept of stability, but rather the concept of language as a very unstable kind of system, which starts appearing. Right. And the concept of trace helps us explain this further. That means all those other words somehow remain in this sign, in this word that is trying to get its identity because of its difference from other words. So, for example, if you use the word cat, then all those other words also somehow inhere in this. The meaning of all those other words also somehow remains in this word. The trace of all those other words remains in this. And similarly, the trace of red also remains in any other word which is contrasted with the word red. Similarly, the trace of the word big remains in the word small. So this means the word trace is more than a simple word in deconstructive theory. If we take another example of trace, we'll say that if we speak a sentence, if I say that I'm teaching you class, I'm teaching you a class, then in this word also the trace of I has to be there in the next word and the next word, because language is a kind of temporal process. If we make sense of a particular sentence, then we must hold the trace of all those other words which have gone before in that sentence. That means when we reach the final word in a sentence, we must be able to hold the trace of all those other words which have gone before. Now, the meaning of all this is that language becomes a very, very unstable kind of system. Let us take one or two simple examples. If we also add not simply the concept of distance, but also the question of tone, the question of pitch, the question of, say, intonation, and there will say that more problems can arise, which attack the very notion of stability. There are two sentences. One sentence is the president says we do not have to follow the lockdown after 15 May. The president says we do not have to follow the lockdown after 15 May. Now see, this appears a very simple kind of sentence, but maybe there are problems inherent in the very use of language, in the very use of any language, in the very use of any example of language. So let us see the sentence. The president says we do not have to follow the lockdown after 15 May. What is the simple meaning of this sentence? The president says that we do not have to follow the lockdown after 15 May. That means after 15 May, everyone is free. Probably this means this. But then it is not as simple as this. The president says, there is something in the word says. The president says, and maybe it cannot be relied upon. And then who is this president? It is not mentioned. Okay, let us say it is President of the United States of America. The president says. Then here the word says. Says refers to a particular man's version, a particular person's version. Even when we read newspapers closely, we read lines like this: the police says this. The reporter, in other words, is trying to shift the responsibility to the police, that okay, this is police version. If we read closely, we'll understand that okay, the reporter is also saying that probably there is room for doubt in this version. The police says this. The president says we do not have to follow. Now let us see the word we do not have to follow. That means we may follow. We do not have to follow. It also means we may follow. And then the lockdown after 15 May. The president says we do not have to follow the lockdown after 15 May. That means we may have to follow not lockdown, maybe, but some other rules which are in place. And suddenly we see that lots of problems start appearing if we look at this sentence closely. Let us take another sentence. I never said you were a bad writer. I never said you were a bad writer. I never said. I never said. But others say this, that you are a bad writer. I never said that you are a bad writer. I always implied this, never said this. Suppose if I say that, oh, there is this problem in this writer, there is this problem in this writer does not use language properly, this writer does not have any substance in his work. I'm not saying that you are a bad writer, but I am saying all this. That means through my remarks, I imply. I never said you are a bad writer. You. I never said you were a bad writer. That means there are others. I said they are bad writer. I never said you were a bad writer. You are a bad reader. You don't read properly. I never said you are a bad writer, but you are a bad reader. I never said you are a bad writer. I never said you are a bad writer. I maybe said that you are a good writer. These are simple words. So even in a sentence as simple as this, ambiguities may arise, problems may arise. And this happens all the time when we are using language, when we are sending those messages to our friends, to people. I always keep rewriting those messages because I sometimes fear that they may be misunderstood. Okay, this means that we come to another aspect of this. You can say that, okay, context maybe is important. Context. And another thing is that it is not simply the context, it is also this fact that language probably, if it can be written, then probably we can understand the meaning of that sentence clearly. But no, if something is written, if a sign is written, that can also further divide its identity. Let us think about a simple situation about context. And here the deconstructive view is that context can never be reclaimed. Context can never be, or context can be infinite. Context can be without any limits. I am giving you one simple example. A sentence like this. Somebody says that taking out, I am taking out the dogs. I think I gave this example earlier also, but this is an interesting example. I am taking out the dogs. How would you interpret the context of this? I am taking out the dogs. Maybe you'll say that, okay, there are dogs probably in the house, and maybe I'm just taking them out of my house. I'm taking out the dogs, maybe I'm walking my dogs. I'm taking out the dogs, and here you can say, okay, dog may be a figurative word, so maybe bad people again. But let me just give you the original context of this sentence which I heard. A child is making drawings on a piece of paper, and then with the help of scissors, she tries to tear those designs of dogs. I'm taking out the dogs. I don't think this context can be easily recovered. And so is the case with those words which are written. Context cannot be easily recovered. And this also brings us to another simple observation. Okay, if we use the word cat and we say, okay, cat has number of meanings. Cat also means, of course, this animal called cat, the pet called cat. But cat can also mean an American. Cat can also mean a very fashionable person. And of course, if you consult dictionary, you'll find many other meanings also, especially in Oxford Dictionary, which is a vast dictionary. But even if you say that I love my cat, or I love cats, or I saw this cat, then this cat also becomes different probably in each context. And here, a simple word like rose or a simple word like tree, if I ask this particular class of 32 students what exactly is the concept of the word tree in your mind, I'm very sure maybe Abid will think about Chinar, maybe somebody else will think about, say, you have Munira ma'am here, she spent her childhood in southern part of India, so she'll have a very different, say, image of tree in her mind. Somebody else may think about neem ka ped, and that means somebody may think about a tree which has some kind of associations. Maybe in your childhood you climbed a tree, or maybe you fell from a tree, or maybe tree has all those different kinds of associations in different minds. So what does it reveal? That means tree. Okay, think about the word cat. Maybe you have your Persian cat and you think about that cat when you think about the word cat. So what is the structuralist view? Structuralist view is that you have a sign, and sign consists of a signifier. So in this case, cat is a signifier. And that cat that is in your mind or something that it refers to, that is signified. So that pet, that animal is the signified. Maybe in a different culture, if we had called that cat dog, then the word dog would have brought in our mind, say, this idea, which is now brought by the idea of cat. But wait a minute. Structuralism talked about non-referential nature of language. And here the idea was that language is non-referential because it does not refer to things. It simply refers to concepts of things. So if I say cat, then it refers to the concept of cat. Cat is a signifier, and the kind of concepts attached to that is signified. But deconstruction takes this point a bit further. How? It says that the word cat does not refer to things or to concepts of things, but to a kind of play of signifiers. Play of signifiers. In other words, when we see a word and we consult the meaning of that word, we see more signifiers. We never come to a particular point where language is referring to that particular thing. Leave alone concept, leave alone the thing. Language is referring to itself. Language is referring to itself. And language is referring to its play of signifiers. That means when deconstructive theory says that there is nothing outside the text, it means that we probably do not go outside the text. And our entire experience consists of text. Our entire experience consists of text. Now here it has some very interesting implications. And what is that interesting implication? That interesting implication is that if everything is made of the play of signifiers, that means if we do not go outside the text, that means all our experience becomes textual. All our experience comes through language. And not only all our experience, our own identity, our own self also consists of language. Our whole identity also consists of language or that play of signifiers. In other words, deconstructive theory is saying that human identity also consists of language. That means you cannot think about human identity beyond the language which is used by human beings. And here an interesting idea is introduced by Jacques Derrida. And what is that interesting idea? That interesting idea is that, and that idea comes from philosophy. And what is that idea? If we try to represent ourselves through the medium of language, then probably we can represent ourselves better through our speech. Because when we speak, then we are sure what we are saying. We are sure about the immediate context of those words. We are sure about the meaning of those words. And words do not slip out of their context. And what is this idea? That human speech. And so if I speak, maybe I am able to represent myself. Maybe I am able to represent my inward experience. Maybe I am able to explain, represent my inward thoughts, speech. But Derrida here disagrees with this view. And this view is that in the history of Western philosophy, speech has usually been considered primary and writing as something secondary. So speech is primary because when I speak, I am in a kind of relationship to my words. There is a sense of immediacy. There is no danger of my words say meaning something else because these are my words. I am using those words. This is a fallacy which Derrida attacks, and he calls this phonocentrism. That means in the Western tradition, there is this idea of the primacy of speech over writing. This is called centering, centering speech, considering speech primary, putting speech at the center of everything. And this is an important concept, the concept of ethocentrism, born from speech, and centrism gives the word center. But Derrida further says that this is also misleading because even when we speak, speech also follows the same rules of language which are followed in writing. How? Because when I speak, even here, differential nature of language is very much into picture. If I use the word cat and then the word cat is cat because it is not all those other words, that means all those operations which are used in writing, they are very much there in speech also. So that differential nature of language, where language differs from, where a word differs from other words, that is very much there in speech also. But then why is it that speech is considered primary in Western culture and writing is secondary? And many important philosophers, Derrida mentions some, say from Plato to Claude Lévi-Strauss, they all have considered writing secondary, writing a contaminated form of speech, writing something which is impure, and speech is something which is pure. That means when I speak, I am representing myself. But once you question this notion that speech is not primary, that speech is also a form of writing, and Derrida calls this art writing. And his book of grammatology is basically a book about writing. And speech also follows all those rules which are followed by writing. So this distinction is actually misleading. But this problem actually arises from a problem in philosophy and how philosophy has followed certain patterns in Western culture. And what is one very important pattern in Western culture? That is given the term, the name logocentrism. Logocentrism. We learned this word phonocentrism. Now we are learning this word logocentrism. Logocentrism, there are two words here. One is logos and the other is centrism. Centrism, putting something at the center. And logos here, here means a sense, a meaning, right? A word. In other words, there has been a dominant tendency in Western culture to think about a kind of center. a particular concept which centers all other concepts, a particular concept which works as a kind of center, and all other concepts emanate from that. So think about the centering principle of knowledge. You'll see that in many accounts of the world, the centering principle is God. That means God is the centering principle and everything emanates from God. Or man is the centering principle and everything emanates from man. Or the concept of freedom is a centering principle and everything emanates from the concept of freedom. Or if we think about today's context, nationalism becomes a centering principle and everything emanates from this concept of, say, nationalism. Or say patriotism, and all concepts emanate from patriotism. Or democracy, and all concepts emanate from democracy. That means in all these cases, there is one meaning, one center, one concept which works as a kind of anchoring principle, as a kind of centering principle, and all other concepts emanate from this. This is one way of putting the idea of centering. The other way of putting this idea of centering is the idea of teleology, teleological concept, you can say. What is this? Things are moving towards the center. One way of saying this, that things are emanating from a center, is coming from a center. Another principle of centering is things are moving towards the center. That means all things, all forces, all ideas, all concepts, all discourses, they are moving towards a center. What Derrida is saying, that in this kind of centering principle, some other concepts are set aside. They are set aside, they are pushed aside, they are banned, they are sometimes hidden from the view, they are pushed to the periphery. And something which provides the center, it tries to pass off something which is beyond the play of signifier that we see in language. It appears as pure, it appears as, say, uncontaminated. That means it itself is pure. Now here this idea also was very much there in some accounts of structuralism. So what Derrida is further saying, that whenever we think about a center and whenever we think about centering principle, they always try to push to the background some other concepts which they have pushed to the periphery. And so if man is the center, then woman is very often pushed to the periphery. If good is the center, then evil is also pushed to the periphery. And in many of these binary terms, dark, light, dark, light, city, forest, you can think about more categories, more binary categories. In all such categories, Derrida is saying that one term is privileged, it is considered important, and the other term is considered less important. His method suggests that this privilege term very much depends on the other term. This privilege term seems to offer a kind of centering principle, but it very much depends on those other terms. So, for example, man is the centering principle in many discourses, and man tries to define himself in opposition to woman. So, if there are some characteristics which man identifies with, then many of those other characteristics which he does not want to identify with, they are given over to women. But that other term also inheres in this first term. The trace, the trace, please, the trace of the other term, the trace of all those concepts which are associated with women, they very much are part of man's identity also. And when they identity, they try to threaten man's identity. So if man tries, they push many of those concepts associated with the word woman to the margin, but they also threaten his whole being. That means, as a concept, no concept is pure. And it brings us to another important insight about deconstruction, that no concept is pure. No concept is pure, and every concept is shot through other concepts. Every concept is shot through the trace of other concepts. So man, woman, dark, light, day, night, Western, Eastern, Western, Eastern, Chinese, American, today's context. In all such cases, the idea of purity of concepts does not hold. So that means deconstruction has that linguistic aspect, and that linguistic aspect is related to this philosophical aspect, where one talked about language as a kind of stable system in Ferdinand de Saussure's theory, but language is not a stable system as Derrida tries to show, where you have that concept of trace. I must quickly discuss another related concept. Derrida uses one word, difference, D-I-F-F-E-R-A-N-C-E, D-I-F-F-E-R-A-N-C-E, difference. There are two ideas in this word. And what are those two ideas? One idea is the idea of differing from something, D-I-F-F-E-R, differ. Differ means when something is different. I differ. On the other hand, there is another word, defer, which means postponement. So you say that the meeting has been deferred. D-E-F-E-R-R-E-D. The meeting has been deferred. I differ from you. That means this, I have a difference of opinion. These two concepts, where you have difference of opinion and where you have, say, postponement, both these are implied by this concept of difference. What happens in language? Meaning is always postponed, and meaning is always a result of a signs different from some other signs. So if we say that cat is cat because it is not bad, it is not red, it is not say many of those other words, then it is the concept of difference. Difference, where the word, where the say one word differs from other words. But it is cat because it is not all those other words, and there is the trace of all those other words in this word cat, and there is the trace of all those other, say, associations in the word cat. So language is not coming to a particular point where it is referring to a particular thing, rather it meaning is postponed, and there is a kind of constant postponement of meaning. We never come to a particular point where meaning is identical with itself. So you have this concept of difference. Cat is cat because it is not rat. Cat is cat because it is not can. Cat is cat because it is not cab. Difference of one phoneme, and this brings out a different word. But because this process is almost endless, and we saw that how this process can be endless. We look at this process from the point of view of phoneme. We also look at this word from the point of view of the opposite of the word cat, cat and dog. We look at this word or a sentence from the point of view of tone, pitch, intonation, and we see that the meaning is never identical with itself. Rather, there is always a kind of flickering of meaning. There is a kind of postponement of meaning. There is a kind of say, deferral where we never reach a point where a particular use of language refers to that thing alone, to that thing itself. So that means these twin processes, the process of difference and the process of deferment, they both are implied, they both are very much part of this word difference. Somebody had pointed out maybe in one of the sessions that he or she did not understand the concept of difference. I hope it is clear now. This means there is a kind of dispersal of meaning. There is a kind of dissemination of meaning. Meaning is disseminated. It never comes to a particular point where it is identical with itself. So this is a kind of textual view of the world, but there is another aspect of the word textual. And what is that other aspect? That when we are made of language, then language is also a kind of force field of ideologies. All words have a kind of ideological nature. This brings us to the concept of ideology, which is an important concept, and that is another dimension of deconstruction, which I'll take up in my next session.